All right, as I was saying, the last class we looked at using or finding those three trig ratios, sine, cos, and tan. Again, to memorize which sides you're going to divide, sine on highway, cosy at home, tan on arms. And now what we're going to do is use those trig ratios to find, first of all, the length of a side in a right angle triangle. All right, using trigonometry. So the first step that we're going to use is we're going to write out all given information. And what I mean by that is when I look at my triangle here, I have three things on it. And so I have to determine what are they. Now, the first thing is inside a triangle, when we have our little numbers inside a triangle, our angles are always going to be on the inside of a triangle. Our sides will be on the outside of a triangle. And so right away, I have a 60-degree angle. And so what I'm going to write here is that theta is equal to 60 degrees. The angle we're going to be looking from is 60 degrees. Now, what I have to determine is I have a side x and I have a side 122. I have to determine which sides those are in terms of, are they the opposite, the adjacent, or the hypotenuse? All right, so first off, as I've mentioned many times, the easiest one to figure out is the one across from the right angle. That is your hypotenuse. It's 122. Now, I also have to figure out which side is x. Now, across, again, from the angle, theta is our opposite. Well, we don't have it. The side beside our angle is our adjacent. That is x. So I'm going to write down the adjacent is side x. So it looks like we're finding the adjacent on this triangle. Now our second step, very key step here. And this is where memorizing those three trig ratios comes into play and makes things work a little bit quicker, is that I'm going to determine which trig ratio is to be used. So here's the key here is you do not get to pick which ratio you want. The information that you have will tell you which trig ratio to use. So in this case, I have to use the trig ratio that includes the hypotenuse and the adjacent. And so that's where I use, again, those phrases to see which one fits. For instance, the first one, sine on highway, on, opposite and hypotenuse. Well, I don't have the opposite here, so I'm not going to use sine. I do have the hypotenuse, but I do not have the opposite, so I'm not using sine. The second part is the cos one, or the second ratio I can try out is the cos. Cozy at home, adjacent, and the hypotenuse. That's the one I got to use because that's the one that has the adjacent and the hypotenuse in it. So I know that cos theta, because that's the angle we're looking from, we called it theta, is equal to at home adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. There we go. So again, you do not get to pick which trig ratio you want to use. Your information will tell you which one you have to use. Now, the third step and last step is sub in your info and solve for x. All right, so again, I have cos theta. Well, theta is 60 degrees, so I'm going to write cos 60 degrees. The adjacent's on the top. That is x. Got to make sure I put them in the right spot here. I have an x there. My hypotenuse is 122, and that's going to go in the bottom. So I'll put that in the bottom there. All right, now here's a key spot with your calculator. Cos 60 degrees. You grab your calculator, and hopefully you have a scientific calculator, or if your cell phone, you might have to turn it sideways so it works. Go to calculator mode with your cell phone and turn it sideways. You hit cos 60. Cos first. Well, actually, that's not true. Some calculators, you got to hit 60, then cos. Most of them, you hit cos, then 60. And here's what you should get. 0.5 is what you should get when you type in cos 60. Now, here's something that's very important. Your calculator has to be what's called in degree mode. And so that means in your calculator, at the top, you're going to have a little d, or maybe it says DEG or DRG. If your calculator doesn't have one of those three, then you're in trouble because you can put in all the right numbers and get all the wrong answers. All right, so again, make sure your calculator's in degree mode. So you hit cos 60, you should get 0.5. For your cell phone, I would suggest, if you can't figure out how to put it in degree mode, go to Google, type in how to put my cell phone calculator in degree mode. And there's instructions there on Google. All right, now I've just found cos 60 degrees. I still am not changing this fraction yet. Not yet. So I have x over 122. Now here's a trick that I'm going to do. I can make every number a fraction if I just divide it by 1. I'm going to take this 0.5 and make a fraction just dividing it by 1. You can do that with any number because any number, say 5 divided by 1, is just 5. If I put 2 and put a 1 underneath it, 2 divided by 1 is 2. So I'm not changing the number, I'm just changing the way it looks. Now, why do I do that? Fraction equaling a fraction. Told you it's going to show up a lot. I'm now going to cross multiply. All right, so I have 1 times x. Well, that's just x. But then I have 0.5 times 122. All right, so I get out my calculator here, and I put 0.5 times 122, and I get, round number here actually, 61. And there we go. So again, we find out what information, what sides we have, and what angles we have, which trig ratio we're going to have to use, and then we sub in our information and solve, and we're going to have that fraction equaling a fraction so that we cross multiply when we're in solving. All right, so now I'm going to try a couple more here. Let's see here. All right, so we get to B here. I have, again, a right angle triangle, which we have to have because it's a trigonometry, basic trigonometry. And I have x, 86, and an angle 54. So again, I'm going to follow my first step. Write out all the given information. What do I got here? I got 3 things. Well, again, the easiest one is, hey, I got the angle here. Theta is 54 degrees. All right, now it's figuring out which sides I have. Again, I always find the hypotenuse is the easy one, but I don't have it because I look across from the right angle. I don't have the hypotenuse this time out. But then I look across from my angle that I do have, and that's my opposite. So I have the opposite is x. All right, well, this side is beside our angle, and so 86 is our adjacent. All right, so I've written out my given information. Now we get to step 2. Which trig ratio do I have to use, have to use? Sine on highway, opposite and hypotenuse. Nope, I don't have the hypotenuse, so it can't be sine. Cos, cozy at home. I have the adjacent at, I do not have the hypotenuse. Well, what's the last one? Let's see if it works. Tan on arms. On, opposite, arms, adjacent. All right. So that's the trig ratio I have to use, is the tan ratio. So I got tan theta. Again, tan on arms, opposite, divided by my adjacent. All right, so there's my second step done. Now I get to my third step. Sub my information in and find x. Well, I know theta, that's my angle here, 54. So I'm going to write tan 54 degrees. The opposite, that's an x. the adjacent is on the bottom. That's my 86. All right, so now again, like I did before, is that the best part about this stuff is that the final finale is the same every time. And so I hit tan 54. And if you have your calculator in the right mode, you should get 1.38 equals x over 86. But again, this is where I'm going to create a fraction equaling a fraction because it makes it easier for me to solve. And so I can make any number of fractions by just dividing by 1. And once again here, I'm going to cross multiply. So I have 1 times x is an x. And then I have 1.38 times my 86. All right, and so my x value is going to be, well, I take that 1.38 and I times it by 86, and I get a 118.68. Again, going to 2 decimal places, as always. And there we go. Writing out my given information, figuring out which trig ratio I have to use, sub your information in, and solving. All right, I'm going to do another one here. So we got C here. Here's our triangle. It's kind of all over the place here. But again, I'm going to find my given information. All right, so again, the easiest thing, the number inside the triangle, that's going to be our angle. It even says degrees. So theta is 33 degrees. All right, now, what sides do we have? Again, this triangle looks all weird. But again, the easiest side to find is your hypotenuse, always across from your right angle. And it looks like my hypotenuse, I do have it. Well, it's on the triangle, and that's x. All right. Lastly, the 408. Again, the side across from your angle is your opposite. So we got the opposite and the hypotenuse here. All right. That's our first step. Now, again, our second step, what trig ratio do I have to use? So try out sine on highway. On highway. Hey, I got it already. It's going to be my sine ratio. So I'm going to write that down. So I have the sine of theta. Again, sine ratio is on highway, opposite, divided by the hypotenuse. All right. Now I'm going to do my third step. See, I'm showing all my steps, showing all my work here. My third step, substituting in and solving. So again, instead of sine theta, I'm going to have sine 33 degrees. All right, my opposite is on the top here. It's 408. And my hypotenuse is actually what we're figuring out this time. That's going to be my x value. All right, well, sine 33 degrees. I'm going to put that into my calculator here. And again, assuming that you have it in the right mode, you should get 0.54 equals 408 divided by x. And as I mentioned, all the finishing steps are the same. So again, I'm going to create a fraction equaling a fraction here by putting a 1 under this 0.54. There we go. All right. And again, with a fraction equaling a fraction, I'm going to cross multiply here. So I got 0.54 times x. And that's going to be equal to 1 times 408. Well, 1 times anything is itself, so it's going to be 408 there. All right, and well, this time I have to getting x by itself. I'm going to have to divide by 0.54. And of course, what I do to one side, I got to do to the other here. So there's my 0.54s. Let's see here. Those 0.54s in front of the x, they divide each other out. And so x is going to equal, let's see here, 408 divided by 0.54. And I get 755.56. Again, going to 2 decimal places. So again, when you're doing these, finding the side or length of a side, we write out our given information, figure out what trig ratio we're going to use, sub our information, and solve for x. In our next class, which will be on Friday, we'll be looking at finding the angles. And the best part is the steps are the same except for the ending. So make sure you do your homework today because it will help you definitely on Friday.